Now, of all the maiden speeches I've heard in the Commons, one of the most remarkable came from the next speaker. It was quite simply electrifying. He's the member for Edinburgh East. Before the election, he ran the Stand Comedy Club, so he'd better be funny. It's Tommy Shepherd.
Thank you, John. I actually spent 15 years hiring other people to make jokes because I was pretty bad at it myself. So, I'm, for my sins, the spokesperson for the Cabinet Office at Westminster. Now, if you're not sure what the Cabinet Office actually does, don't worry, because the people running it aren't that sure either. It is, in truth, a little bit of everything and nothing, and it gives you the opportunity to have a fairly broad sweep about the affairs of what happens in Westminster. So I wanted not to make a rant or a rabble-rousing call here today. I just wanted to share with you my top 10 most ridiculous aspects of the Palace of Westminster that I have discovered so far in the 4 months that I've been there. Coming in at number 10 is the fact that we're not allowed to call each other by name in the chamber. Many of us have got into trouble for slipping out the name of someone we know who's been engaged in debate, only to be reprimanded and to be told that it has to be the right honourable gentleman for whatever shire town they represent, and you can never remember them anyway, or the honourable gentleman if they haven't been a member of the Privy Council, and since you don't know who's a member of what, it's very hard to distinguish between them. But we press on. The second, coming in at number 9, most ridiculous thing, would be the fact that the whole layout of the chamber is designed to be adversarial rather than consensual, with two sides facing each other. And those of you who study this on the television, you will see that there is actually a line in front of the front bench on the carpet of each side, which I'm told is 2 sword lengths apart, in order that people don't get too aggressive with each other. And if you step over that line, you are chastised and you are in breach of the rule. This, I believe, is where the phrase "towing the line" came from, for those that are interested in political history. My 8th most ridiculous thing is the fact that by deliberate planning, the chamber of the House of Commons was designed so that at maximum it could only seat half of the elected people who were there to take part in the debates. That just seems to me to be fundamentally contemptuous of the whole idea of people in this country being represented in a chamber. Tasmina's already referred to my 7th most ridiculous thing, which is the fact that we're not allowed to applaud, a natural human reaction when you agree with a sentiment someone has expressed. But what's more bizarre than that is that whilst we are not allowed to applaud, there seems to be no restriction whatsoever on the number of animal impersonations that the Conservative members are allowed to do in the middle of the debate. Coming in at number 6 is the process of voting itself. You will be appalled when I tell you this, but we are paid by the taxpayer for up to 3 hours a week on a busy business week to simply stand in a corridor and wait to give our name to a clerk to explain whether we are voting for or against the proposition. 3 hours a week we stand to give our name, and this is a parliament, by the way, which you would almost think is sponsored by Apple, given that we're all given a free iPad when we get there. You know, and if we cannot begin to look at electronic voting and coming into the 21st century, it seems to me just dreadfully archaic. The other thing, of course, to do with voting is that you're not really allowed to abstain. We're told that 20 or 30 Labour MPs last night abstained on the vote against the government's austerity charter, but we can't be sure whether they actually abstained or whether they just weren't feeling too well or whether they couldn't be bothered or whether they got locked in the toilet. Because there is no way of recording an abstention. The only way you can record an abstention, I'm told, is to vote twice. Go through the aye lobby and then turn around and go through the no lobby, and you will be recorded as an abstention. Now, how 21st century is that? The 5th most, number 5 in my top 10, is the way the prayers are said in the Parliament, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. Every session starts with prayers, and it's conducted exclusively by and for those people who believe in the Church of England. And I think it's an insult to people of no faiths and of other faiths who are in this country that should be the case. Number four in my top 10 is the uniforms that are worn by the door staff within the House of Commons. This is, quite frankly, Georgian pantomime dress. You will have seen these men, quite literally, in tights and swords, and the most ridiculous part of the uniform, which I've come across, is a curly ruffle thing they wear down their back, which is called a wig bag. It seems to me just unfair to these poor souls to make them put on this costume in a chamber which is meant to be about making political and important decisions for the country and for the world. Coming in at number 3 is the fact that my first occasion on walking into the terrace of the House of Commons, after a hard day's political debate, no doubt, was to come across no less than 3 people who we had just defeated at the election in Scotland, standing there with the same pass that I had, with the same access and privileges that I had. And that is because once you join the House of Commons, you are members of a club. And you can stay a member of the club even if the electorate decide that you no longer are fit to be there. The Commons themselves will make you welcome. And those former members are allowed to wander around without having to pay the consequence that the electorate wished them to have. But mind you, that's not as bad as number 2 on my list, which is the House of Lords. It is, quite frankly, it is absolutely amazing that as we wander around the chamber and we see some of these well-kent faces that used to be Labour MPs in this country in the past, wandering around, making decisions, and you realise that they're all still there. The political process didn't get rid of these people. And in fact, within members of Parliament, we have a situation unique in the civilised world where we actually accept that most of our members of Parliament are not elected by the people. And that seems to me an anachronism whose time has come, and if we do nothing else, we must advance the case for the abolition of the House of Lords before our time. And it was conference. I'd a challenge restricting this just to 10, but coming in at number 1 above all else is the fact that we sit there having a mandate to go and represent our people, and we sit against benches opposite made up of a Conservative Party hell-bent on the most right-wing vicious attacks on the people of this country and these islands, and they sit there with their majority having had the support of less than 1 person in 4 on the electoral register in this country. That is a democratic outrage, and I tell you, for one, this first past the post system is the most corrupt and corrupting practice on a democracy, and I would for one resign my seat and give it up tomorrow if they would bring in a system of proportional representation in this country.
Tommy, you missed out one thing. For the first month, you've got to remind people, we didn't actually have telephones. We had telephone numbers, but no telephones. We didn't actually have desks, but thank goodness, we all had sword hooks with ribbons.
That's right. That's right.
Do you remember?
You do.
And I have lost track of the number of plastic toy swords I've been given by members of my constituency party. They're all hanging there in a wee row. What have you done with your sword hook?
Oh, I didn't have a sword. I'll tell you what, something
We've
similar.
all got sword hooks, you just haven't found it.
Something similar, if you recall, was the state opening of Parliament, when we all had to traipse down to the House of Lords to look at them in the finery. And I have never seen so many tiaras in the one room in my life. And I remember it was actually Hannah Bardell said to me, next year we're getting that as well, even if they have to be plastic ones.
Tommy, thank you very much.